We are not going anywhere. The IAEA is now there, is at the plant, and is not moving. It's going to stay there. We're going to have a continued presence there at the plant.
Well, strong words there from the head of the International Atomic Energy Agency as a team of nuclear experts continue to inspect that nuclear plant today in Ukraine.
Yeah, the United Nations Watchdog group began assessing damages at the plant yesterday, but they were initially delayed for hours because of shelling. Right now, there's major concern the ongoing fighting at and near the plant could lead to a potential Chernobyl-style nuclear disaster. Newsy correspondent Jason Bellini is live in Kyiv, Ukraine, with the latest on this high-stakes mission. Jason, good morning. So the group got their first look inside the plant yesterday. What all did they inspect? What did they find?
Hi, Alex. So the inspectors are there for their second day, and here's what they say they've been doing. They're checking out the emergency equipment to make sure it's working properly. They're making sure the backup diesel generators that have enough fuel in them, and they're checking the reserves of emergency water pumps. That's the kind of thing that you'd expect them to be doing, and it's interesting and all, but what's the deal? How dangerous is the situation there? What can the IAEA tell us of what they found and what kind of danger this nuclear power plant is in? They didn't say much yesterday. The head of their delegation didn't say much yesterday beyond what was already known, that, as he put it, the physical integrity of the plant has been violated repeatedly. And by violated, he means that shells landed on buildings next to nuclear reactors. The footage we've been showing you of the inspectors, that comes from Russian state media. Their cameras were there. Ukrainian Western journalists were not. Just giving you a bit of context before we hear from President Zelensky and what he said in his nightly address last night.
Ukraine did everything for this mission to occur, but it is terrible that the occupiers are trying to turn this necessary International Atomic Energy Agency mission into a useless tour of the station. Unfortunately, the occupiers did not let journalists on the territory, but organized a crowd of their propagandists. Unfortunately, the representatives of the IAEA did not protect the representatives of the independent media.
The IAEA teams are supposed to be releasing their report in the next few days. What's bothering the Ukrainian side is what the IAEA hasn't said, what the agency hasn't declared clearly, that the presence of Russian weapons at the plant is a threat to nuclear safety. Rob, Alex?
Jason, it's kind of hard to get your head around the idea of actual combat near a nuclear power plant. What can you tell us about the fighting in that area right now? And is there anything, practically speaking, the inspectors can do to prevent that from happening again, or do they remain at the mercy of the war like everybody else?
Well, Britain's defense ministry is saying that shelling continued in the district where this power plant sits. Fighting yesterday prompted the shutdown of one reactor. Here's what I think is important to understand. These are water-cooled nuclear reactors. If there's a drop in the pressurized water that's used for transfer of heat out of a reactor, it would heat up very quickly. And that's the scenario that could lead to catastrophe. That cooling equipment is, in a perfect world, in a more sane world, very far away from fighting. But that is just not the case here. And can the IAEA do anything about that? And not really. They don't have jurisdiction over the war. In reality, no one does, but they're hoping that by sending a message, the Ukrainian side is certainly hoping that the IAEA will send a message that this has got to stop, that the Russians need to get their weapons of war away from the plants, because this is just unacceptable. Rob?
Ukraine correspondent Jason Bellini, once again there on the ground in Kyiv. Jason, thank you. We're here to talk about the military perspective of what this means for the current state of the war between Ukraine and Russia is Jason Beersley, former Green Beret who was part of multiple covert tactical missions with the Army Special Forces and Joint Special Operations. Thank you so much, sir, for your time this morning.
Yeah, you bet. Good to be here with you.
Listen, the threat of some kind of nuclear disaster has been the subtext of this war for months. We're more than 6 months in, and now it seems like the sense that something truly on that scale could happen, that those concerns have been ratcheted up big time. What is your sense of how real those concerns should be? And can this team of inspectors really do anything besides a photo op that shows their concern?
Yeah, it's a great series of questions. It's really regretful that we are here. The upside to this is that the team is on the ground, and their mission, as your report in the field suggests, is to really define what are the critical gaps that this infrastructure is facing today. Now, once they have that defined, or once they really understand what generators are up and where the systems are going to be flawed, they can apply or at least appeal to the Russians who are in control of the Ukrainian technicians who are manning this plant to make the fixes necessary, and those will be extremely necessary. The problem is Russia has all the advantage here. Tactically and strategically, they're sitting on a critical piece of infrastructure that, as your report suggests, they can load up weapons in the area, they can maintain a sort of presence there, and as the Ukrainians are not going to penetrate that sort of area, it's a defense protection for their tactical assets. So this is a complex situation, and the IAEA's got to do the best they can on putting the report together that suggests what fixes are necessary immediately.
So when they do come up with that list of fixes that are needed, what then would that force the Russians to do, if anything? What necessarily will that report mean in the bigger picture when it comes to either what Ukraine can do strategically or what Russia will do as a result?
Well, once they come up with the list, it's not a clear shot that Russia will have to comply.
Right.
Russia is in the leverage seat here. So the way that the administration, so President Biden and Western allies, can really affect this solution is through allegiances with folks like Turkey, and having to sit on the other side of the negotiating table in this phase of the war is very difficult for the Western allegiances. Russia provides energy for Germany, for all of Europe, so they can cut that off. They're in a very good position to be able to back off the West. So now is more important than ever that our relationships with other regional allies are as strong as they can be, because we're going to have to get everybody to the table to say, look, you've got to protect this critical infrastructure. And if you've watched Putin over the last 20 years, you know that he's not concerned about civilian casualties. So that puts this in a high-risk category.
And to that very point, the chief of the agency said while he was there yesterday, gunfire was, quote, uncomfortably close to him. So it's not like they're even having some kind of détente because this team is in town. They are as brazen as ever. But do you really think Putin wants some kind of nuclear disaster here? Because we both know that that would be a game changer and would absolutely prompt a global response. Does he really want to create that situation, or just create the threat, the appearance that I may do this as a scare tactic?
I think that's a great point. Number one, it does operate first and foremost as a diplomatic scare tactic to back everybody off. But number two, Russia sat on some nuclear disasters in the past, and they know what the limitations of this critical infrastructure are. There are ways that they could foresee, let's call them mitigated leaks or contamination that does moderate damage, but still has the dramatic effect in the international community as would be a dirty bomb or something like this. So he's got several ways to play this. But the real important thing is, what I don't believe Putin wants on his hand is an actual nuclear reaction meltdown that would be the size of contaminating Europe. And as we've heard from certain representatives in Congress, potentially trigger an Article 5 NATO sort of threshold crossing. I don't believe he wants that on his hands. But in the meantime, what he's going to have to do is use this, from my perspective, to basically negotiate the Ukrainians in the West back from whatever positions we're at now. And so it puts them in a tactical and, again, strategic advantage, both military and politically. It's just not a good place to be. And again, it's one of the reasons why we shouldn't get to this phase of a war without much leverage on the table.
And as a reminder, this is the biggest nuclear power plant in all of Europe. This is not some, ancillary facility. It's chilling what could happen.
Absolutely. Jason Beardsley, former Green Beret, who is a part of multiple covert tactical missions. As always, thank you for your time. Good to see you. Have a great weekend.
Thank you. You too.
Thanks.